But it's so far away.
Glenn, you said you didn't
I guess it is.
You can't have reruns now.
I didn't. That's what
Over,
we
Glenn. Over. Let it go.
Okay, before we get going, are there any questions about the first 2 weeks? You all got essentially the instructions for how to deal with the blurs of the steel ball being at other than the desired location, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can make adjustments for it. It's been a big stumbling block in the past, and I never wrote it down just like I did for that email. But if you follow that, you should be able to arrive at pretty good conclusions. And I was just talking to a couple over here, and they figured out acceleration. Well, you can do that, or you can figure out velocity. But in either case, you're going to make one. Well, let's see. If you figure out velocity based on acceleration, then acceleration is your standard, right? Say, I know that it's 32 feet per second per second. On the other hand, if you determine acceleration from the velocity, in that case your velocity is not your standard, but it's a measurement. And then from that you work back to what acceleration must have been. Logic tells you that acceleration should be constant. Right? It's always the same. Velocity is going to change. The figures that I saw over here were actually, even though the measurements were not done in the right place, they were pretty encouraging. So, but you can draw your own conclusions about Newton. And what else? I can't think of anything else. Today, we're going to start out. Oh, today is the introduction, or sort of the warning shot to the shop tomorrow. I believe that I had on the schedule something. Of course, I haven't looked at it, but that's okay because I figured you didn't either. So the idea, I think, was that this week would be doing ballistic photography for the first time. And as part of that, before I forget it, I should mention requirements for this. Eye protection and hearing protection are mandatory. There's an awful lot of you. There are fewer groups. So it'll be one camera per group. It's simply because we can't fit in too many of them at the same time. You'll need a tripod. And I think I might as well mention this now. The subject matter can be anything that you bring, except that I will censor it. So typically, it should not be anything living. No steel or crystalline plastics. Nothing with a hard pit in it. And typically, whatever it is should not be much bigger than like that. By the way, if you are, I presume you have an inkling that we're going to be photographing this stuff shot up by a bullet. And you need to provide the subjects. If you were thinking, for some reason, that you're going to buy a melon or a cantaloupe, may I suggest that you forget it. Not because we couldn't do it, but because it would be disappointing. They just put a hole in it. Nothing happens. Smaller stuff, I think it tends to be more spectacular in its response. Barbie dolls are out of the question. It's illegal to shoot a Barbie doll.
Really?
Barbie or Mattel or somebody will come after you.
Okay, right.
I don't really know whether that's true. But urban legend has it that they're very protective of that figure, and if you deface it in some fashion or another, their lawyers are going to come. I mean, what can they do? I don't know. Well, it's a good thing it's now that we're doing this, although the last time, many years ago, I ran into a problem with this because somebody posted in the report, a reporter issue came out with a back cover indicating the kinds of things that go on in Andy's lab. And the illustration that they used was a target and a mouse stretched legs and arms up into the corners of the page.
Oh.
Of course, it was an April Fool's issue, but
Right.
nevertheless, I had the SPCA knocking on the door. We want to see what happens in the lab. I think last year somebody brought a goldfish. That's sort of okay, but I'm not sure what we do with a goldfish. Shooting goldfish is probably not a good idea. So anyway, the bottom line is I will censor whatever you bring. There's a limited number of shots, probably maybe 25 or 30. So if there's too much material, in that case, not everything is photographed. If there's too little, then whatever we have is photographed. If there is some juicy material, let's say a tomato, that tends to splatter all over the place, and that will probably reach the cameras. So you might think about protecting the camera in some fashion. I don't know about yourselves. The worst that happens, you get whatever juice is on you. But you can, if you want to, you can think about that too. Lens cleaning material is probably a good idea. And something that I always forget, and that is the backgrounds. I can supply essentially one background, and that tends to get pretty messy fairly soon. So if you think about the fact that you'd like a clean background, in that case, help me by bringing something that will serve as a background. You only need to cover up maybe an area this wide, maybe that tall. Anything bigger would just get in the way. So seamless will not work unless we cut it up. What else? Oh, this is one of those cases, and I don't want to make fun of the Photographic Society of America or even the professional photographers of America. But very often at conferences and meetings and so on, they will have sort of an opportunity to photograph some subject. And what happens is that whatever the subject is, they're put in the middle of a room or something. And the photographers go all the way around and take photographs of that subject. So everybody sort of ends up with the same thing, except from slightly different points of view. Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, that's the same thing that we're going to do. So all the cameras are going to photograph the same thing at the same time. And so there is no opportunity for you know, I'd like this one to be lit this way or something. Yeah, won't happen. We don't have enough time to do that. And, so your photograph is going to be from a slightly different point of view, maybe cropped slightly differently, but essentially it'll be the same subject at the same time as everybody else's photograph is. Are there any questions? Can you think of anything that I might have left out that would be useful to you? Yeah.
Requirements for the camera, film, digital,
Doesn't
need a
matter.
sync cord, anything?
Camera's a camera.
Sounds good.
One thing that would be useful if you can get away from the camera to trip the shutter. You're not going to be that close, but you could be fairly close. And remote releases or something like that are useful because we can cram the cameras closer together without having to have individual people next to it. Okay. Oh, are there any other questions? Maybe that'll refresh my memory about the question that I'm thinking about that I can't think of.
One camera per person or one camera per group?
Per group.
Okay.
It could be one per person, but the idea is again not to have 24 of you. 24 cameras. It's impossible. The only way to deal with something like that, if it were to happen, is to break you up into two groups. And then the first group gets the crummy pictures, and the second group gets the good ones. Yeah.
So we're doing this indoors?
No, we're going to go to a rifle range in Penang. I'm just kidding. We're going to do it right here. See the bullet holes in the wall? That's what got me in trouble. It's a long story. So I just want to reiterate this. You know, safety first. I will go to great lengths to explain and warn and set up so that the risk is minimized. But obviously, bullet holes in the wall do happen. I don't think they're going to happen tomorrow. So, talk about the background subjects, the glasses, the hearing protection. And you asked about the release, or the trippers or whatever. I think we're all set. So, assuming that there are no other questions,
What focal length lens should we grab? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, that's okay. You'll probably be working about 10 feet away of something which is maybe the size of a trash can. So, I mean, if it were 35s, if everybody had 35, the old-fashioned 35s, you know, in that case I could suggest, well, get this lens. But if you all have different digital sensors, the same focal length lens is going to either cut off more or give you more. So if I tell you roughly, well, it's the size of this, the top of this thing, and you'll be maybe 10 or 12 feet away. So now you figure out which focal length that will do.
Gotcha.
Will do for you, all right? The speed on the sensor probably will be something like 400. And the rest of it you'll find out tomorrow. Okay? So now, if I can do this, I'm going to rely on something that I prepared some time ago for another group. But I think it kind of covers what I would like to in terms of some of the parameters that one might want to keep in mind when you get involved with making decisions about high-speed photography. Problems, I don't know whether to turn on this first or this first. And I'll do it by, oh, okay, so I already said it's a prepared thing, so yeah, I've used the material that you're going to see in the past. And it is a PowerPoint. If you'd like a copy of it, just bring in media or whatever those things are. We'll plug it in now and take a copy away. Of course, it'll be no audio, but on the other hand, I'm going to give that a shot. Maybe there will be audio and visuals together. And blow the hell out.
It wasn't quite facing the projector.
It wasn't.
Don't touch it.
Oh, is it? Okay, is that now kind of centered?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting. Are you sure you want to shut your computer down now? No. So then what I want to, that's all on there, so it's sitting down here. Okay. So let's try to get 300 tools. All right. Okay, you want to dim these?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, please.
Is that better?
Yep. Perfect.
Okay. So that's the first line. Try to well, I'm not the only one, but I think anybody that considers high-speed photography, one of the first things that you want to determine is what are some of the controls, what are something that you want to keep in mind when you're going to engage in high-speed photography. I like to approach it from the point of view that we want to do something which is hard to do. Anybody can do things that are easy to do. It's the hard ones that we want to engage with. So we take a look at a couple of conditions, and we'll say, well, if I have a fast event, it's easy to make blurry photographs, right? This is easy to do. It is also easy to do to make sharp photographs of things that are not moving very fast, right? So both of these things are easy to do. On the other hand, if you combine these and you want to make sharp photographs of fast-moving events, now that's hard to do. Whether it's aesthetically correct or not, we want to do the hard thing. Sharp pictures of fast-moving events. Well, the minute that you say something like, I want a sharp picture, don't you want to have an idea of what is sharp? Well, sharp is kind of a subjective, I don't know, intellectual statement of some kind or another. Because it really depends on the person that is defining it. My vision is not as sharp as yours, so I will probably tolerate fuzzier things than you do. So, sharpness could be defined in one of these two ways. That you want a reproduction, typically we're talking about a reproduction, to be so sharp that you cannot tell that it's fuzzy. Right? If you can't tell that it's fuzzy, it's got to be sharp. Well, that you'd call imperceptible blur. You say, well, why imperceptible? That's because anything which moves relative to the sensor during the exposure is going to be fuzzy if it's motion blur. And then for other reasons too. It's just the degree that you're interested in. In this case, the degree is so small you can't detect it in the reproduction that you're looking at. Of course, then you could say, well, you know, I'll little blur is okay. I can still make it out. Or I can use Photoshop and sharpen it. I don't know. But the idea is that you loosen your requirements. You say, I don't need it to be, as they say, tack sharp. A little blur is okay. Now you're talking about, I will accept a certain degree of blur. And now we can proceed. If your criterion of sharpness is imperceptible, in that case you are talking about something which is closely related to some other characteristic of images. Damn, I sound like I'm lecturing, isn't it? That's terrible. So you're connected with. Okay. Before I get to that, obviously there is this line because the next one is the one I was thinking about. But whether you're talking about imperceptible or whether you're talking about acceptable, what it is that you can accept will determine the exposure time as we go on forward. And if it's imperceptible, in that case you're closely related, as I said, to something that you already know from depth of field, circle of confusion. The blur cannot be any bigger than whatever the circle of confusion is that you're willing to accept in your depth of field situations. This degree of blurring, so that it's not any bigger than the circle of confusion, is a highly demanding requirement. It will call for the most effort to get there. That's the next one. This allowable blur, where you say, oh, I can tolerate some blur in a subject. The industrial standard tends to be something like a subject can move about 10% of its size during the time that the exposure is made. So if you have a rocket that's 100 feet long, it's okay if it moves 10 feet during the time that you make the picture. On the other hand, if you have a foot-long ruler and it moves 10 feet, it's no good. But if it moves 1.2 inches, I think I got it right. That's okay, because 12 inches, a tenth of that is 1.2, right? So you're always referring to how big is the subject that you're photographing in terms of how much movement the subject can have during the time that the exposure is